You know the feeling. We've all been there, right? The final exam, the huge presentation at work, that game-winning shot. Everything is on the line. You've prepared, you're ready, but when the moment comes, you just fall apart. Why? Why does that happen? Well, today we're going to dive into the science of why we sometimes crumble under pressure.
To really get this, let's rewind the clock to one of the most legendary collapses in sports history. Picture this. It's Augusta, Georgia, 1996, the final round of the Masters tournament. An Australian golfer named Greg Norman, they called him the Great White Shark, is just playing out of his mind. He seems totally, completely unbeatable.
He starts the day with a 6-stroke lead. Now, for those of you who don't follow golf, a 6-stroke lead on the final day of a major is, well, it's pretty much a done deal. It's considered almost impossible to lose from there. The trophy basically had his name on it already. But then, the unthinkable started to happen. One bad shot, then another. The lead just melted away, and he ended up losing the whole thing by 5 strokes. I mean, this guy was a champion, one of the best athletes in the world who had practiced for this exact moment his entire life. So what on earth went wrong? And what can his story teach us about our own moments of failure?
You know, the fascinating thing is, Greg Norman's story isn't some weird fluke. It's actually a classic example of a pattern that shows up again and again, affecting even the best of the best. We're talking athletes, surgeons, students, you name it.
I mean, sports history is just littered with these moments. Just think of Jana Novotná at Wimbledon, crying on the shoulder of royalty after victory just slipped through her fingers. Or how about the Olympic shooter Matthew Emmons, who was one single shot away from a gold medal and he hit the wrong target? From Jimmy White missing a super simple shot to win the world snooker title to the legendary boxer Roberto Duran just quitting in the middle of a fight, these aren't just bad days. These are total meltdowns under the brightest lights.
Okay, so to really figure out what's going on, we need to get one thing straight. We tend to throw around the words choking and panicking like they're the same thing, but from a psychological standpoint, they're actually polar opposites.
The author Malcolm Gladwell really hit the nail on the head. He said, choking is about thinking too much. Panic is about thinking too little. See, one is a failure because you're overanalyzing everything, and the other is a failure because you just revert to a primitive fight-or-flight instinct.
Let's break that down. When you choke, you are just drowning in anxiety. You're overthinking every single tiny step of something you know how to do automatically. Think about a pro basketball player suddenly thinking, okay, what's the angle of my elbow on a free throw he shot 1,000,000 times? Now, panicking is totally different. That's when a sudden shock makes you just abandon all your training and react wildly, like a quarterback who gets surprised and just flings the ball anywhere.
So here it is, the key scientific definition. Choking is when your conscious brain tries to take over a process that should be on autopilot. It's kind of like trying to manually fly a 747 after you've let the autopilot handle it perfectly for years. What happens? Well, you're probably going to nosedive.
All right, so we get what choking is. But why? Why does our brain betray us like this? Well, it turns out there are 3 main theories that really explain the mechanics of this mental breakdown.
The first big culprit is distraction. But hold on, it's not what you think. It's not about being distracted by some noise from the crowd. It's about being distracted by what's going on inside your own head.
See, when the pressure's on, your brain starts worrying about the consequences. What if I miss this? What are people going to think? And these thoughts, they're like resource hogs on your computer. They eat up your working memory. That's the mental bandwidth you need to actually do the thing you're trying to do. And here's the real kicker. This can actually hit people with higher working memory the hardest. They rely on all that extra brain power, so when it gets clogged up with worry, their biggest strength just vanishes.
Okay, culprit number 2 is something called explicit monitoring. This is the whole thinking too much idea, where you basically turn a spotlight on yourself and it has disastrous results.
So pressure makes you super self-conscious about what you're doing. You start breaking down a smooth, automatic skill into all its clunky beginner parts. That expert golfer is suddenly thinking about his grip, his backswing, how his hips are turning, all this stuff that became pure instinct thousands of hours ago. In a matter of seconds, an expert basically turns back into a complete novice.
And finally, there's the physical side of it. Your body's response to all that stress can actually push you way past your peak performance sweet spot into a state of what's called overarousal.
This is all explained by something called the Yerkes-Dodson Law. Just imagine a graph that looks like an upside-down U. Arousal is basically how amped up you are, your heart rate, how alert you feel. You need a little bit of it to be focused. That's the very top of the curve, your peak performance. But when the stakes get too high, your arousal shoots way past that sweet spot.
Your heart's pounding, your muscles get tight, and your performance just tanks. You go from being perfectly primed to totally paralyzed. So, that's the problem. It sounds pretty bleak, right? Well, here's the good news. Choking is not inevitable. Not at all. Psychology actually gives us a really clear playbook for building resilience and performing when it really counts.
A ton of this work happens before the big moment even arrives. You gotta build your armor. You do this by practicing under pressure, making those stressful situations feel normal. You can use visualization. The great Jack Nicklaus used to say, "I never missed a putt in my mind," and focus on what to do, not what not to do. So instead of don't leave it short, think putt firmly. And maybe most importantly, develop a routine, a consistent ritual that acts like a mental anchor, calms you down, and tells your brain, okay, time to let the training take over.
And when you're actually in that crucial moment, that routine is your lifeline. First, just breathe. A few deep breaths can literally slow your heart rate down. Second, use a simple mantra, like one word, smooth, or power, to keep your conscious mind busy so it doesn't interfere. Third, focus on the result. See the ball going in the hoop, don't think about your elbow. And finally, just do it. Trust your training. Don't pause, don't give yourself that extra second to overthink. Just go.
You know, maybe the most powerful tool of all is just a simple shift in your mindset. The tennis legend Billie Jean King famously said this: if you can see pressure not as a threat, but as an opportunity that you've earned, it changes everything about how you experience it.
This gets at a really cool psychological trick. Think about it. The physical feelings of anxiety, a racing heart, sweaty palms, they're the exact same as the feelings of excitement. So by just relabeling that feeling in your head, by telling yourself, I'm not anxious, I'm excited, you can literally transform that nervous energy from something that hurts you into something that helps you.
So the biggest takeaway here is that choking isn't some deep character flaw. It's a cognitive and physical event that you can actually understand, and, more importantly, that you can manage. We've gone through the science, we've laid out the playbook, so the only question left is, what are you going to do with it? How will you handle your next big moment?